17-year-old Alicia had just finished her shift at the local diner and was driving home on the quiet back roads of her small town. It was late and the streets were empty. The moonlight gave everything a soft silver glow. She hummed along to the music playing on the radio, tired but content. Her car, an old sedan, was running smoothly, and she was only a few minutes from home. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights filled the rearview mirror. Startled, Alicia's heart skipped a beat. She had done nothing wrong. She glanced at her speedometer. She was well within the limit. But when she pulled over to the side of the road, her hands instinctively gripped the steering wheel tight. The officer who stepped out of the patrol car was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked like someone who had been in the force for a while. His uniform was crisp, his boots shining in the headlights. He approached Alicia's car slowly, almost too slowly, like he was trying to set a certain tone. She rolled down her window as he reached the door. "Evening, ma'am. License and registration, please," he said in a flat tone. "Sure," Alicia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She fumbled for her papers in the glove compartment. "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer, whose name tag read Crowley, paused for a moment, eyeing her through the window. "I pulled you over because I saw you swerving back there," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You been drinking tonight?" Alicia blinked in confusion. "No, I haven't had anything to drink." "I don't even drink." Crowley gave her a long look as if deciding whether to believe her. He seemed to hesitate, but then he went on. "Well, we're going to check just to be sure. Step out of the car." Alicia's stomach dropped. Why was he being so cold? Her mind raced. She hadn't done anything wrong. Why would he ask her to step out? She had been careful on the road, making sure she followed every rule. "Is this really necessary, officer? I told you I'm not drunk." "I said get out of the car, ma'am," Crowley repeated, his voice suddenly firmer. Alicia knew she didn't have much of a choice. She opened the door and stepped out, her legs feeling shaky. The cool night air hit her skin, making her shiver slightly. Crowley moved around to the passenger side of the car, his flashlight illuminating the inside of the vehicle. He started to speak, but Alicia interrupted. "I told you, officer, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just driving home from work." Crowley ignored her. He leaned inside the car, his flashlight sweeping over the seats and floor. Alicia felt her heart race as he started rifling through her things. Her purse, her backpack, even the glove compartment. Then he stopped. "What's this?" he asked, pulling something out of the glove box. Alicia's eyes widened. It was a small baggie. She hadn't seen it before. The bag was filled with pills, and immediately she felt a cold wave of panic sweep over her. "Wait, I don't know what that is. I don't even use drugs." "That's not mine," Alicia protested, her voice rising. She wasn't sure where the bag had come from, but it wasn't hers. Crowley didn't listen. He was already radioing for backup, his voice calm, almost too calm. "Got a situation here. I need a unit to come down for a search. Drugs found in the vehicle." Alicia felt a rush of confusion and fear. She stared at the bag in his hand, but it didn't seem to matter. Crowley was already acting like he had everything figured out. The bag was evidence now, and nothing she said would change that. Within minutes, another patrol car arrived. A second officer stepped out. A younger guy who barely looked old enough to drive, but he didn't seem to question Crowley's actions. He didn't seem to care about anything but following orders. Alicia was told to stand on the side of the road while the two officers took a closer look at the bag and her car. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you're under arrest," Crowley said, his voice even. "We've found evidence of illegal drugs in your vehicle." "No, that's not mine. I swear," Alicia tried to explain, her hands trembling as the cold metal of the handcuffs snapped around her wrists. The reality of the situation started to sink in, but it didn't make sense. She hadn't done anything wrong. The officer read her rights, but Alicia wasn't listening anymore. All she could think about was how she had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. She could tell them everything. How she had been working late, how she was just trying to get home, how the bag had never been in her car before. But none of that mattered right now. She was being arrested. Her heart felt like it was beating in her throat. The ride to the station was a blur. Alicia couldn't focus on anything but the pounding of her heart, the overwhelming sense of dread, and the steady hum of the police car's engine. She tried to hold back the tears, but they came anyway. Quiet, fast sobs she couldn't stop. The officers didn't speak to her, and it seemed like they didn't care about anything she said. When they arrived at the station, Alicia was shoved into a holding cell. The steel bars clanged shut behind her, and for a moment she just stood there, unable to process what was happening. The officer who had arrested her gave her a final uninterested look before walking away, leaving her alone. She sank down onto the cold bench and stared at her hands. The weight of the handcuffs still on her wrists seemed to pull her down even further. She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes, hours? It felt like an eternity. A few hours later, her mother arrived. Alicia's heart leaped at the sight of her, but Marion didn't look like she was going to be able to fix this. Alicia had seen her mother go through hard times before, but this was different. They said you're being charged with drug possession, Marion whispered, her face pale. She had no idea how to react. All she could do was stare at her daughter through the bars. Alicia? This can't be happening. Alicia tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She wanted to tell her mother that it was all a mistake, that she hadn't done anything wrong, but nothing she said would matter now. The nightmare was just beginning. The days after Alicia's arrest felt like they blurred together, one long stretch of confusion, fear, and sleepless nights. The small town that had once felt like home now seemed like a place where she didn't belong, a place that had turned its back on her. Alicia's mother, Marion, couldn't stop worrying. She hadn't left the house for days, constantly on the phone with the lawyer trying to figure out what to do next. Alicia had never seen her mother so stressed, so helpless. Marion was usually the one who held everything together, but this time it felt different. This time there was no easy solution. Alicia, on the other hand, spent most of her time sitting in her small, dimly lit cell, staring at the walls. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the baggie of pills in Officer Crowley's hand. Every time she tried to make sense of what had happened, she only felt more lost. Her public defender, a man named Tom Sullivan, wasn't much help either. He was an older guy who had been working in the system for years, but Alicia could see he didn't have much faith in her case. When he first came to visit her at the station, he was quick to suggest she take a plea deal. "It'll be quicker, less risky," he had said, his voice low and tired. "The evidence is against you. The pills, the search, it's hard to fight." Alicia's gut told her that something was off. She wasn't stupid. She knew what it meant to have a criminal record in a town like this. She had seen it happen to other people, to her friends and family. It meant limited job opportunities, people looking at you like you were trouble, like you were nothing more than your past mistakes. But Alicia wasn't willing to just accept this as her fate. She had been raised to believe in doing what was right, to stand up for herself even when things didn't go the way she expected. So when Tom Sullivan handed her the plea deal papers, Alicia shook her head. "I didn't do anything wrong. I don't want to plead guilty." The lawyer sighed and looked at her with pity. "Look, Alicia, I get it, but you're facing serious charges. Possession with intent to distribute. That's no small thing. You could be looking at years in prison." "I don't care," Alicia said, her voice firm. "I didn't do it, and I'm not going to let them destroy my future just because they can." Tom didn't press the issue after that. He promised he would try to gather more evidence, but Alicia wasn't sure how much hope she had left. It seemed like everyone around her had already made up their minds. Back at home, Marion refused to leave the kitchen table, scrolling through pages of legal documents she didn't understand. Alicia's father, who had been in and out of the picture for years, hadn't shown up once. His absence was a constant reminder of the life Alicia had grown up in, a life where you had to rely on yourself, because the people who were supposed to be there for you often weren't. Things got even worse when Alicia learned that Officer Crowley had given his statement to the press. The local news station reported the arrest like it was a victory. Crowley was described as a hero, someone who was cleaning up the streets. Alicia couldn't believe her ears. How could they be celebrating someone who had lied about what happened that night? How could the town just accept his word as truth? The media coverage only made things worse. Alicia's face was plastered across every news outlet, her name linked to drugs even though she had never touched a drug in her life. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of it all. People she had known for years were suddenly avoiding her, crossing the street when they saw her. They believed the stories, the headlines, and the image Crowley had painted of her. It wasn't until the following week that things started to take a turn. Marion, desperate and not willing to give up on her daughter, found a lawyer with more experience, someone who wasn't just going to roll over. Rachel Kim was known in the area for taking on tough cases. She had helped clear the names of several people who had been wrongfully accused, and her reputation was solid. Marion wasted no time reaching out to her. Rachel agreed to take Alicia's case, and for the first time since the arrest, Alicia felt a small spark of hope. "Listen, Alicia," Rachel said in their first meeting. "I know this is hard, but I promise you, we're going to take this one step at a time. We're going to look at every piece of evidence, every detail, and we're going to find out what really happened that night." Alicia didn't know what to expect, but she was grateful for Rachel's confidence. Rachel didn't waste time. The next day, she and her team began their own investigation into the arrest. They dug through the police records, checked Crowley's past cases, and started to get a clearer picture of what was going on. The more Rachel looked into it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Crowley had a history of questionable behavior. There had been several incidents in the past, small things that were brushed under the rug. A traffic stop here, a search there, things that didn't add up. But nothing had ever stuck to him. He had always been able to cover his tracks. Rachel wasn't going to let that happen this time. One afternoon, as they went over the details of Alicia's arrest, Rachel's team made a discovery that could change everything. They found a discrepancy in the police report, a gap in the timeline that didn't match up with the dashcam footage from Crowley's car. The footage of the stop was there, but it had been tampered with. It didn't show what Alicia had been doing in her car, but it showed Crowley's movements. The footage was suspiciously blurry at certain points, almost like someone had intentionally blurred out key moments. Alicia couldn't believe it. Could it be that the whole thing had been staged? That Officer Crowley had planted the drugs in her car. As Rachel kept digging, it became clearer that there was something much bigger going on. It wasn't just Alicia's case. Crowley had been making arrests like this for years, and no one had questioned him. Alicia was just one more victim of a system that was supposed to protect her, but had failed her instead. But now, Rachel had the evidence she needed to fight back. By the end of the week, Alicia's case had taken a new turn. With Rachel's help, Alicia felt like she was starting to see a way out. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. Crowley had too much power, and the system was stacked against her. But Alicia had learned one thing over the past few days. She wasn't going to let this go. No matter what it took, she was going to fight for her innocence, and she was going to make sure Officer Crowley faced the consequences of his actions. As the days went on, Alicia could feel a shift in the air. It wasn't just the weight of the case hanging over her. It was something deeper. The longer Rachel Kim worked on her case, the more Alicia felt like something was finally happening, like someone was fighting for her in a way no one had before. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in weeks, a small glimmer of hope. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Alicia could feel the pressure mounting with every passing day. She wasn't sure what exactly Rachel had uncovered, but whatever it wasn't going to be a smooth ride. Officer Crowley had too much power in their town, and everyone seemed to trust him. If Alicia was going to win this, she needed more than just hope. She needed something solid, something that would make the truth undeniable. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and her team worked tirelessly. They sifted through every piece of evidence they could find. They asked for more footage from nearby traffic cameras. They spoke to people who might have been in the area that night. Rachel even managed to track down some old colleagues of Officer Crowley who had worked with him in the past. Slowly, the picture started to form. It wasn't long before Rachel came to Alicia with the first big break. "We found something," Rachel said one morning, sitting down across from Alicia at the small cafe they had been meeting in. Her eyes were sharp and her voice was steady. "It's not much yet, but it's a start. Crowley's body camera footage doesn't match the timeline in his report. We're looking at a gap, about 10 minutes right when you were supposed to be getting arrested. We think he was setting something up." Alicia's heart raced. "What do you mean, setting something up?" Rachel leaned forward, her hands on the table, the air between them tense. "We think Crowley planted the drugs in your car. The footage we found doesn't show everything that happened during the search. It's like he knew exactly where to look, almost like he'd been there before. It doesn't make sense unless he was trying to make sure you got caught." Alicia stared at Rachel, barely able to process the words. "But how can we prove that?" "That's the tricky part," Rachel replied, sitting back in her chair. "We need to find more proof. We need witnesses, other officers who were with Crowley that night. We're also trying to get our hands on any evidence he may have planted in the past. There's a pattern here, Alicia. Crowley has been doing this for years and he's gotten away with it. Alicia's thoughts were spinning. For so long she had felt like a victim, trapped by a system that didn't care about her, but now it seemed like she might actually have a chance to fight back. The evidence wasn't perfect yet, but it was enough to show that something wasn't right. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The next few weeks were filled with intense legal battles, phone calls, and late nights. Alicia's mother, Marion, stayed by her side every step of the way, offering what little comfort she could. She still couldn't fully understand what had happened to her daughter, but Marion was determined to help in whatever way she could. They weren't alone anymore. Rachel's team was pulling in all the right strings, making connections, and following leads. Then, one afternoon, Rachel called Alicia with news that would change everything. "I need you to meet me at the office," Rachel said, her voice more urgent than Alicia had ever heard it. "We've got a big lead." Alicia's heart started to race again. She knew that every call, every meeting could be the turning point of her case. She wasn't sure what Rachel had found this time, but she was ready to find out. When Alicia arrived, Rachel wasted no time. "I've got a witness," she said, motioning for Alicia to sit down. "Someone who was with Crowley the night of your arrest. Someone who was in the car when he pulled you over, and they're willing to talk." Alicia blinked, trying to take it all in. "A witness? Someone who saw what really happened?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, a rookie officer named Evan Torres. He was just starting out and Crowley was his partner for the night. Evan's been sitting on this for a long time, but after seeing how you've been treated, he wants to do the right thing. He says he saw everything and he's ready to testify." Alicia couldn't believe it. A witness? Someone who could back up what she had been saying all along. This could change everything. But at the same time, she felt a rush of fear. Officer Crowley wasn't the type of man to let this go easily. If Evan Torres spoke out, there was no telling what Crowley might do. "I know it's a risk," Rachel said, noticing Alicia's hesitation. "But this is the break we've been waiting for. We've got a shot now." Alicia thought for a moment, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what to do, but she knew one thing. She couldn't back down now. Not when she was so close. Not when the truth was finally within reach. The next day, Rachel arranged for Alicia and her mother to meet with Evan Torres. He was a young man barely out of training with nervous eyes and a quiet voice. Alicia could tell he was scared, but there was something else there too. He looked like someone who was struggling with a decision, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. When they sat down in Rachel's office, Evan spoke slowly like he was testing the waters. "I didn't mean for things to get this far," he began, his eyes flicking nervously between Rachel and Alicia. "When I first started out, I just wanted to help people. I never thought I'd be part of something like this." Alicia leaned forward, her voice soft but urgent. "You saw what happened, didn't you?" Evan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I did. I saw Crowley plant the drugs in your car. I saw him do it, and I didn't know what to do. I'm still not sure what to do." Alicia's breath caught in her throat. "You saw it? You saw him put the drugs there?" Evan's eyes dropped to the floor and he nodded again. "I didn't know how to stop him. I was new. I was scared. Crowley told me to stay quiet, and I did. But after everything that's happened to you, I can't stay silent anymore. I have to tell the truth." Tears welled up in Alicia's eyes. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. She had someone who could prove what she had known all along. Officer Crowley had framed her. The next few days were a blur. Rachel and her team worked fast, preparing Evan to testify in court. The evidence was mounting, and for the first time since her arrest, Alicia felt a flicker of hope. She was going to fight back. She was going to take down Officer Crowley, and she was going to prove that she was innocent. But the path ahead was still filled with obstacles. Crowley had the backing of the department, and he wasn't going down without a fight. Alicia knew the battle wasn't over yet. But as she sat in Rachel's office, surrounded by people who believed in her, she realized something. This was her fight now. And she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. The day of the trial had arrived, and Alicia felt a mix of emotions that she couldn't quite control. Her stomach was in knots and her hands were clammy as she sat in the courtroom, waiting for everything to unfold. It had been weeks since Rachel had told her about the witness, Evan Torres, and now everything was about to change. But Alicia knew that one mistake, one wrong move, and it could all come crashing down. She sat in the front row with her mother, Marion, who hadn't left her side since the whole ordeal started. Marion looked as anxious as Alicia felt, her eyes darting around the room, taking in every detail. She'd never been to a courtroom before, and the whole atmosphere felt cold and intimidating. The long wooden benches, the sterile white walls, the clink of the gavel, it all made Alicia feel like she was trapped in a place where no one cared about the truth, only about what could be proven. Alicia's eyes flicked nervously toward the prosecution's table, where Officer Crowley sat with his lawyer. He looked calm, too calm, like he didn't have a care in the world. His uniform was neat, his posture perfect. He was playing the role of the respectable officer, the one who followed the law, the one who had a badge and a sense of authority. Alicia wanted to scream. She wanted to tell everyone in the room that he was lying, that he was the one who had framed her, that he had planted the drugs in her car. But she couldn't. Not yet. She had to wait. She had to trust Rachel. Rachel, who had been by her side through it all, was sitting quietly beside her, reviewing her notes. She hadn't said much, but Alicia could see the determination in her eyes. Rachel had been doing everything she could to make sure they had all the evidence they needed. Alicia didn't understand everything about the law, but she trusted Rachel. She had no choice but to. The courtroom doors creaked open and the judge entered, signaling that the trial was about to begin. Everyone stood as the judge took their seat, and Alicia could feel her heart racing in her chest. This was it, the moment that could change everything. "Please be seated," the judge said in a calm but firm voice. Alicia sat down, her fingers gripping the edge of the bench in front of her. Her mind was racing as she tried to stay focused. She glanced around the room one more time, taking in the faces of the people who would decide her fate. The jury was seated at the far side of the room, their faces unreadable. Alicia didn't know if any of them were on her side, but she had to believe they were there to listen, to understand. The prosecutor, a man named Adam Brooks, stood up and cleared his throat. He was tall and stern-looking, with short brown hair and a pinched expression. He didn't seem like the kind of person who would show mercy, and Alicia knew that his job was to convince the jury that she was guilty. His eyes locked onto Alicia for a brief moment, but she didn't look away. She had to stay strong. She had to show them she wasn't guilty. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice smooth but authoritative, "we are here today to determine whether the defendant, Alicia, is guilty of possession of illegal drugs with intent to distribute. On the night of her arrest, Officer Crowley conducted a routine traffic stop. What he found was disturbing: a bag of illegal drugs in the defendant's vehicle." Alicia felt a sickening twist in her stomach as Adam continued to speak. His words were sharp, like knives cutting into her every time he mentioned the drugs. He was painting her as a criminal, as someone who deserved to be behind bars. But Alicia knew the truth. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The prosecutor went on, describing the search of Alicia's car, the discovery of the drugs, and Officer Crowley's testimony. He even brought up Alicia's past, how she had been arrested once before for a minor incident involving a school fight. It wasn't a criminal charge, just a misunderstanding, but the prosecutor used it to paint a picture of a troubled young woman. Alicia felt her face flush as the words stung. Why did they have to drag up her past? This wasn't about that. This was about what happened that night, about the officer who had lied. When Adam finished his opening statement, Alicia felt like the room had closed in on her. It was like everything was against her, like she was fighting a losing battle. She glanced at her mother, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. Marion wasn't saying anything, but Alicia could see the tears in her eyes. Her mother had always believed in her, always fought for her, even when it felt like no one else cared. Then it was Rachel's turn to speak. Alicia could feel her heart racing as Rachel stood up, walking slowly to the front of the courtroom. She had a calmness about her, a confidence that Alicia envied. Rachel took a deep breath and turned to face the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Rachel began, her voice steady and clear. "What you've heard from the prosecution is only part of the story. What they've shown you is a picture, but it's not the full picture. Officer Crowley may have his version of events, but I am here to tell you that version is not the truth." Alicia sat up straighter. Rachel wasn't backing down. She was fighting for her, and Alicia was going to fight with her. We have evidence, Rachel continued, her eyes scanning the jury. Evidence that shows Officer Crowley did not conduct this stop the way he claims. We have a witness, someone who was there, who saw what really happened. Alicia held her breath as Rachel spoke. This was the moment that could make or break everything. Evan Torres, Rachel said, her voice firm. A rookie officer who was partnered with Crowley that night has come forward. He saw Crowley plant the drugs in Alicia's car. He is prepared to testify that the drugs were not in Alicia's car when she was pulled over. The room fell into stunned silence. Alicia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Evan Torres, he was the key. This was what they had been waiting for. The truth was coming out. Finally, someone was going to expose Officer Crowley for the liar he was. The prosecutor stood up quickly, his face flushed with disbelief. Objection, Your Honor. We have no evidence that Officer Torres is credible. This is just hearsay. The judge raised a hand to silence him. I'll allow the witness to testify, Mr. Brooks. We'll hear what Officer Torres has to say. Alicia's heart raced even faster. Evan Torres was going to speak. He was going to tell the jury what he had seen that night, and that could change everything. When Evan finally took the stand, Alicia couldn't help but watch him closely. He was nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the edges of the witness box. But when he started to speak, Alicia could see the truth in his eyes. I didn't know what to do at the time, Evan said, his voice quiet but clear. I was just starting out and Crowley was my training officer. He told me to stay quiet, but I couldn't ignore what I saw. I saw him plant the drugs in Alicia's car. I saw him put that bag in the glove compartment when she wasn't looking. Alicia felt a weight lift off her shoulders as Evan spoke. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't imagining things. Someone had seen it. Someone who wasn't afraid to speak the truth. The prosecutor tried to discredit Evan, but it was clear that his words were having an impact. Alicia watched as the jury exchanged glances, their faces reflecting doubt about Crowley's story. The evidence was starting to speak for itself. As the day wore on, Rachel's team continued to present their case, showing the jury the holes in Crowley's testimony, pointing out the inconsistencies, and revealing the truth that had been hidden for far too long. Alicia could feel the tide turning. The weight she had carried for so long was beginning to lift, and for the first time in weeks she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could get her life back. But she knew the battle wasn't over yet. Officer Crowley wasn't going to go down easily. There was still more to be done. But Alicia wasn't afraid anymore. She had Rachel, she had Evan, and she had the truth on her side. The final day of the trial had come. It was the day that Alicia had been dreading and hoping for all at once. The day when everything would be decided. After weeks of back and forth in the courtroom with evidence presented, witnesses called, and both sides making their arguments, this was it. The jury would decide her fate. Alicia had never felt so exhausted in her life. She had spent countless nights lying awake, wondering how this would end. It wasn't just the trial that weighed on her. It was the months of fear, the feeling of being trapped, of knowing that her entire future was in the hands of people who didn't know her at all. The thought of being wrongly convicted, of spending years in prison for something she hadn't done, was a nightmare she couldn't escape. But today there was something different. The weight of the situation was still heavy, but Alicia could feel a sense of peace settling over her. It was as if, no matter the outcome, she had already won. She had fought back. She had stood up for herself, and that in itself was a victory. Even if the jury didn't see it, even if the world didn't understand, she knew the truth. She wasn't the criminal they had tried to make her out to be. Rachel sat beside her in the courtroom, her usual calm demeanor now edged with tension. They had fought for so long, and now all they could do was wait. The closing arguments were done, and the jury had been sent out to deliberate. Alicia's fingers curled into fists at her sides as she sat, barely able to keep still. The silence in the room felt suffocating, like the whole world was holding its breath. Officer Crowley, sitting across the room, looked as composed as ever. He was still trying to look like the hero, the upstanding officer of the law, but Alicia could see it in his eyes. There was something there, something that told her he was worried. He knew that the walls were closing in on him. Rachel leaned over and whispered in Alicia's ear, "We've done everything we can. Now it's out of our hands." Alicia nodded, her throat tight. "I know, I don't know how much longer I can wait." You've made it this far, Rachel said softly. You've already shown them who you really are. And we have the truth on our side. Alicia tried to smile, but it felt weak. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel: relief, fear, hope, dread. It was all tangled up inside her. She looked at her mother, who was sitting across from her, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Marian had been her rock throughout all of this, and Alicia knew that her mom was just as anxious as she was. But Marian had also been a source of strength, constantly reminding her to hold on to hope. We'll get through this, baby, Marian said, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. We're so close. We've come this far, and we're not giving up now. Alicia took her mother's hand and squeezed it. I know. I just wish I could know what's happening in there. The hours seemed to stretch on endlessly. The sound of the clock ticking felt like a countdown, each second dragging out the suspense. Alicia tried to distract herself by thinking about everything she had been through, the fear, the loneliness, the uncertainty. And then she thought about how far she had come. She remembered how Rachel had believed in her from the start, how Evan Torres had stepped up to do what was right, how everyone who had helped her fight for the truth had been a part of this journey. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a team, and together they had done something powerful, even if it didn't go their way. Alicia knew she had made a difference. And that mattered. The door to the courtroom finally opened and the jury filed back in. Alicia's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment. She could see the expressions on the faces of the jurors. Some were calm, others looked uncertain. It was hard to tell what they were thinking. The judge looked over at the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? One of the jurors, a woman with short dark hair, nodded. We have, Your Honor. Please present the verdict, the judge said, his voice calm but firm. The room fell into absolute silence as the juror stood up and handed the paper to the judge. Alicia's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The judge read the verdict aloud, his voice echoing in the stillness of the room. We, the jury, find the defendant, Alicia, not guilty of the charges of possession with intent to distribute. Alicia's world seemed to tilt, her knees almost buckling beneath her. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Not guilty. It wasn't real. The words didn't seem to make sense. She had been cleared. It was over. The crowd in the courtroom reacted immediately. Some gasped, others whispered. But Alicia barely heard them. She was overwhelmed by the sound of her own heartbeat, by the rush of emotions flooding through her. It felt like she was floating, as if she hadn't actually heard the verdict, as if it couldn't be true. Marian was the first to reach her. She grabbed Alicia in a tight hug, tears running down her face. You did it, baby. You did it. You're free. Alicia could barely speak. She was too choked up, too overcome with emotion. She just held on to her mother, feeling the weight of everything finally lift off her shoulders. After everything, the lies, the fear, the endless struggle, she was finally free. It was hard to believe. It felt like a dream. Rachel was standing a few feet away, her face soft with relief and pride. She had been the one to fight for Alicia, to believe in her when no one else did. Alicia made her way over to Rachel, her legs shaking with emotion. Thank you, Alicia whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. Rachel smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. You did it, Alicia. You fought for yourself. You never gave up. I'm just glad I could help. The bailiff started to clear the courtroom, but Alicia barely noticed. She was still trying to take in what had just happened. She had been acquitted. The charges had been dropped. She had been given a second chance at life. As she walked out of the courtroom, still numb from the rush of emotions, Alicia looked back at the courthouse one last time. She had been here so many times over the past few weeks, each visit bringing more fear, more uncertainty. But now she was leaving it behind. She was free. She stepped outside into the fresh air and let the sunlight hit her face. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alicia took a deep breath and smiled. She was free. She had her life back, but there was something else too. As much as she was grateful for the victory, she knew this experience had changed her. She would never forget the people who had stood by her, who had helped her find the truth. She would never forget the feeling of being falsely accused, of having her future threatened. It had shown her the importance of fighting for what's right, of standing up for herself and others. And it had made her realize that even when things seem impossible, there's always hope. As she walked away from the courthouse, Her mother by her side and Rachel not far behind, Alicia knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, she was stronger than she had ever been. She had faced her fear. She had fought for the truth. And in the end, that was all that mattered.